Hi, welcome to another edition of Handlaid Tracks and 3D Printed Trains with Socrates. Today we're going to take a look at how I built a joiner to join straight pieces of track together. The system I'm working with, which is basically a fast tracks method of laying hand-laid tracks, is basically building a 3D jig on a printer and using that to hold the rails and cross ties in place while I solder everything together. Doing that with also with a 3D printed tie bed glued to the bottom of it, you end up with sections of track. Now either you can connect these off the track of the layout, or you can connect them on the layout, but one way or the other you're going to have to connect them. I don't really want to use slip connectors for the most part. My plan is to solder all the rails together, so in the end the entire layout will be one single piece. It makes taking it apart more difficult when and if I need to, but at this point it's not that large a layout, it's just a small table, and I'm only building the time saver part of it to begin with. So I needed a jig to hold two sections of track together in alignment to allow me then to solder them together. What I came up with was basically a supportive jig that would go underneath the rails, because I still have to put two more cross ties in the proper position. It holds those cross ties in place and then allows you to solder the rails down. I've extended the joiner from what's in this video to a longer piece that allows me to hold the track in a better orientation, because I was worried that the straight might not be really straight across the joint. And with the two sets of wings to the sides, it makes it easier to hold the track in alignment. I'm just starting with the two sets of tracks, and the first thing you have to do is put the cross ties into the jig, and then the rails themselves, the two pieces of track, line up on the ends of it. I added some weights just to hold everything in place, because again I was concerned about making sure this was straight. And then once everything seemed in proper place, make sure to use the track gauge. These are Fast Tracks 3-point gauges, but they're very effective in making sure the rail's in the right place. And if the gauge is happy, well then you know you're probably in the right place and you can go ahead and start soldering. And at first, I'm not actually joining these two sections together, because the first rail solder is just on the long rail for the left piece, and that second solder joint is just the long rail on the right piece, so they're not actually connected yet. The next joint will be the actual connecting, where the two short rails will be tied into the other rail. So this is the time it's critical to make sure that you're lined up. Of course, it was critical for the other rail as well, and I found I had to do a little adjustment after the fact, but for the most part it went fairly easily. I probably could have used a little more solder in the joint itself, but both rails are soldered to the cross tie, and then I'm gluing the entire tracks with a Pliobond to a 3D printed tie bed that I'm printing up, that I designed and printed up. And so the entire structure is really quite well attached. It's pretty tight in the jigs. It's not impossible to get them out, but it is a little bit tight. And then with the 3D printed tie bed, making sure that it won't bind up at all. I left a little extra space in it, but I wanted to make sure that when I glued it, it would go in cleanly, because the glue is just, you put glue on both sides, you allow it to dry, and then when you stick it together, it adheres essentially permanently. You only have a moment to readjust it. I was making sure that the inside of the rails were clean, because it was a spot it didn't really feel right. I tried to file it, but it still felt a little bit tight, and it was that first solder joint, so I put it back in the jig, hit it with the soldering iron, loosened it up, and moved the rail over just a tiny bit. And then at that point it started to feel a whole lot cleaner. And then I thought, well, now we've got a pretty good joint there. And that's when the Pliobond comes out. You put a little, in this case, like I said, it's two-sided adhesive, a little bit of liquid adhesive on both sides. You let it sit. I think it only sat for about 10 minutes or so. Once it's not shiny, you can see that it's dry. Set the two sides together. You have a moment to readjust it. These all press into fit. They have a little groove for the rails on the printed tie bed. Add some weight. Wait a little bit, an hour or so, and then you're done with a nice piece of straight track in this case, joined together. You can't see the joint for the most part, and it worked really well. So that was me, my system to build a straight track into two pieces and join them together using a joiner, and doing a similar thing for curved tracks, and starting to lay some tracks here. Handlaid Tracks with some 3D printed trains. I told you we were going to do it. So I hope you liked it. If you did, why not hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you again really, really soon. You know what I mean.